Hey sleuths, welcome back to Cold Case Study. I'm your host Morgan, and my co-host Houdini the Demon Cat is around here somewhere, and I'm sure you'll hear him at some point. A big shout out to Travis, who supports me on Patreon, and you can support me too for $1 a month. And if you're looking for some hand-designed shirts, prints, and totes, check out my friend Elisa's shop at bit.ly/E Elise, SD, or by following the link in my Instagram bio. This week's case is famous, but you might not know everything about what happened to Elizabeth Short, aka the Black Dahlia. So grab your sleuth book and top off your coffee, because today we're diving straight in, and I've only got one question for you. Can you help solve this cold case? Warning, the following audio contains adult content, mentions of sexual assault, mutilation of a corpse, and of course, murder. Listener discretion is advised. On the early morning of January 15th, 1947, a mother and her young daughter went for a walk in a developing neighborhood in Los Angeles. That's when the pair stumbled across what they thought was a mannequin in a vacant lot. But it's never a mannequin, is it? Realizing it was a body cut in half, the mother rushed down the street to a house where she called the police, not wanting her daughter to realize what she had seen. The mutilated body of Elizabeth Short. But how did she end up there? Well, to figure that out, let me take you all the way back to July 29th, 1924 in Boston, Massachusetts. Elizabeth Short was the third of 5 daughters born to Cleo Short and Phoebe May Sawyer Short. The Shorts moved around before settling into Medford, Massachusetts. Her father, Cleo, owned and operated a miniature golf course until the stock market crash in 1929, where he lost everything, plunging the family into poverty. In 1930, Cleo's car was found abandoned on a bridge, and it was presumed that he had died by suicide by jumping into the water below. Phoebe May moved her girls into a small apartment and worked at a bookshop to support them, even managing to pay for Elizabeth, who suffered from severe asthma, to have lung surgery and to spend her winters with family friends in Florida, where her lungs would be under less stress. Elizabeth would drop out of high school in her sophomore year, and when Elizabeth was 18 in 1942, Phoebe May got a letter from her long-dead husband. Cleo Short had run away in 1930, starting a new life for himself in California. With her heart set on being a movie star, Elizabeth struck a deal with her father. She would be able to go out to California and live with him if she helped out by cooking and cleaning. Elizabeth agreed and moved in with a man she hadn't seen since she was 6 years old. By January of 1943, Elizabeth wasn't holding up her end of the deal, going out late at night, partying, not cooking, not cleaning. I can't expect much more from an 18-year-old, because I wouldn't have held up my end of the deal at 18, teenagers. And this led to arguments and subsequently to her moving out of her father's house. Elizabeth then moved in with friends and worked at the Camp Cook Base Exchange. She was in an abusive relationship with a member of the Air Force for a while before moving to Santa Barbara, where she was arrested for underage drinking. Fun fact, the picture of the Black Dahlia that most of us know and recognize is actually her mugshot. I'll be including that as well as a better photo of her in my case notes on my Instagram and Facebook. The police sent Elizabeth back to Medford with her mother, but she then relocated to Florida, where she met and became engaged to Major Matthew Michael Gordon Jr. of the Army Air Force, who would go to fight in World War II and die less than a week before the war ended. Only if he had lived, and they could have had a happily ever after. It would have been so much better. In January of 1947, Elizabeth was living in Los Angeles, dating a married man known as Red Manley. The two had just returned from a trip to San Diego together, and Red dropped Elizabeth at the Biltmore Hotel, where she was supposed to meet friends. Elizabeth allegedly used a telephone at the hotel in the lobby and was then seen at a cocktail lounge just down the block from the Biltmore, less than half a mile away. That would be the last time she was ever seen alive. When she was last seen, she was wearing a tailored black suit, which would be later described by the media as a tight skirt and a sheer blouse, further sensationalizing her crime. So now we're back to where we began, January 15th, 1947. Elizabeth's body had been severely mutilated. She was bisected, meaning chopped in half, and there were several lacerations and pieces of flesh missing from her vaginal area, thigh, and lacerations to her face. And as if that wasn't enough, a Glasgow smile was carved into her face. If you don't know what that means, you're lucky. But if you want to know, think of Heath Ledger's Joker and that just red smile painted onto his skin. How it was thicker than the mouth it was itself and how far it went up his cheeks. Now, imagine all of that skin that's painted red just cut off, removed. It's not just a thin little smile. I've seen the crime scene photos and where you can see this smile, and y'all, I do not recommend them if you've got a weak stomach or human decency. Like, it's not great. Like, these photos are horrible, and I don't know how anybody could do that to a person. But moving on, the autopsy report labels the cause of death as hemorrhaging from lacerations to the face and shock from striking blows to her face and head. Upon inspection, it was also found that Elizabeth had most likely been anally raped prior or directly after death, but there was no sperm found, meaning the perpetrator wore a condom. Her body had also been meticulously cleaned with gasoline, removing any fingerprints from her body, which is something to jot down in your sleuth book for later. Her fingerprints were then sent to the FBI via what would have been a fax at the time, and ran through a finger recognition database where her prints were pulled up thanks to her arrest from underage drinking. And then the media met their newest obsession once they had identified her. A group of reporters from the Los Angeles Examiner called Phoebe Short, Elizabeth's mother, and told her that her daughter had won a beauty contest in order to get information on her. Once they were satisfied that they had enough information about Elizabeth, they broke the news to poor Phoebe that her daughter had been murdered. What the actual fuck? Pardon my language, but what the actual fuck? And as if to make up for being horrible human beings, the reporters offered to pay for Phoebe's flight and hotel room in LA if she would fly out and help with the investigation. To make things worse, the media portrayed Elizabeth as a sexually provocative woman who walked down Hollywood Boulevard, ready to ride any man that promised her stardom, even suggesting that she was a prostitute or perhaps a lesbian. This sensationalization led to the media giving Elizabeth the nickname the Black Dahlia, a play on the movie title The Blue Dahlia from a few years earlier, and also bringing in mind the fact that Elizabeth usually wore black suits, black dresses, black lace. She really liked the color black, and she had beautiful black hair and pale skin. So that's where the Black Dahlia came from. And they also deemed her murder a, quote, sex fiend slaying. Again, what the fuck? A side note, my apologies for the demon cat who has awoken from his nap, and all the noise he might make. Getting back to his story though, a person claiming to be the murderer called James Richardson, the editor of the Los Angeles Examiner, on January 21st, complimented him on his covering of the Dahlia case, and then he confessed to the murder. The man claimed that he was going to turn himself in after he allowed the police to investigate a little, to chase him. He also told James Richardson to, quote, expect some souvenirs of Beth Short in the mail, end quote. 3 days later, on the 24th, a postal worker flagged a manila envelope that had been addressed to the Examiner and other Los Angeles newspapers. The letters addressing the package had been cut out of magazines and pasted onto it, and on the front of the envelope, more pasted letters spelt out, quote, "Here is Dahlia's belongings, letter to follow," end quote. Inside was Elizabeth's birth certificate, her business cards, some pictures, names written on scraps of paper, and an address book that belonged to one Mark Hansen. Everything had been cleaned with gasoline, but several partial prints were found and sent to the FBI. These prints would, however, be damaged in transit somehow, so they are no longer on file, they have never been run, and that evidence is just lost to history. On the same day the parcel was delivered, a pair of black suede heels and a handbag were found on top of a garbage bin not too far from where Elizabeth's body had been found. The two had been cleaned meticulously with gasoline just like the rest, and no fingerprints were found. On March 14th, a suicide note was found with a pile of men's clothing. In the note, the man claimed to have killed Elizabeth, but was too much of a coward to turn himself in, and instead he chose to take his own life. Did Elizabeth's killer actually die that day, or perhaps was someone trying to fake a suicide to add drama to the Dahlia investigation? Or was it just somebody who thought that suicide was the only way out and decided to confess to a murder they never committed? We'll never know. But investigators had a few suspects, including Mark Hansen, whose address book had been mailed to the Examiner along with the rest of Elizabeth's things. Hansen was well-known, wealthy, he owned a theater and a club, and he was sexually attracted to Elizabeth, who turned him down on multiple occasions, according to Anne Toth, Elizabeth's roommate at the time she went missing. Hansen was, however, cleared of any wrongdoing. Red Manley, Elizabeth's married boyfriend, was also cleared after passing multiple polygraphs. Notable people who the police suspected of the murder included This Land Is Your Land singer Woody Guthrie, mobster Buddy Siegel, and George Hodel. Hodel was one of the original suspects for the crime, but nothing concrete was ever found and no charges were brought up. He found his way onto the police shortlist after he was accused of raping his 14-year-old daughter, Tamar. Despite 3 witnesses testifying that they had seen Hodel raping Tamar, he was acquitted at trial. So again, for the 5th time this episode, what the fuck? There are 3 witnesses to him raping his own daughter and he wasn't charged with anything. How does that happen? But anyways, since he was now known as a sexual predator, and he was a doctor who would have been trained to dissect a body in the way that Elizabeth's had been done, with a hemicorporectomy, a technique that would have been taught while he was at medical school, where you bisect a human and sever the vertebrae in their spine to make it a clean halving. I don't know the term, guys. But the LAPD put Hodel under audio surveillance for a few months in 1950. They bugged his home with 2 microphones that would be monitored by a team of 18 detectives. Most of the tapes are rather bland. Hodel would have sex, he was an asshole to his secretary, and he complained about money problems. There are, however, 3 instances of deeply sketchy shit being said. At 8:25 p.m. on February 19th, the tapes caught a woman screaming twice, despite there being no sounds of a woman being in the house before this happened. They didn't hear a woman enter, they didn't see a woman enter, they didn't hear her talking, anything like that. So my question is, who was the woman? How did she get there? Where did she go? Why didn't anybody do anything? And later in that same evening, Hodel said to a friend, quote, "Realized there was nothing I could do. Put a pillow over her head and cover her with a blanket. Get a taxi. Expired 12:59. They thought there was something fishy. Anyway, now they may have figured it out. Killed her. End quote. Like, what? Like, what the hell? Who did he kill? Why wasn't this investigated? But that's not even the worst part. Sometime later, they would record Hodel saying, quote, "Supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia. They couldn't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary anymore because she's dead." End quote. Hodel's secretary, Ruth Spaulding, had died of a drug overdose in the presence of her boss, George Hodel. Before calling the police, Hodel burnt several of Ruth's things, and police didn't investigate further due to lack of evidence because, he burnt the evidence. However, documents were later discovered to show Ruth was going to blackmail Hodel over malpractice, where he was prescribing things that didn't need to be prescribed. He was ordering tests in order to get patients to pay more money. Like, he was just doing all kinds of hinky stuff with his patients. But could Ruth also have planned to blackmail him over murdering Elizabeth Short? We may never know, but that's what it sounds like to me. After Hodel's death in 1999, his son Steve Hodel, a former LAPD detective, went through his things and found a photo album that he believed contained naked photos of Elizabeth Short. One photo turned out to be of a family friend, and the other still remains identified. I've seen the pictures, they don't really look like Elizabeth, so yeah. But just so you take the rest of Steve's story with a grain of salt, despite people being pretty okay with his assumptions that his dad killed Elizabeth Short, he would also later claim and write a book that his dad was also the Zodiac killer, so I don't know, he might just be projecting his daddy issues onto these crimes. Steve, however, is convinced that his father murdered Elizabeth Short and even wrote a book called Black Dahlia Avenger. While the book does include various incriminating evidence, it was all circumstantial. Steve found a receipt stating his father had purchased concrete bags, the same type that were found where Elizabeth's body was dumped. Suspicious? Yes. Proof of murder? No. Despite the area where Elizabeth was left being a suburban neighborhood now, it was largely undeveloped back then. Head Deputy District Attorney Stephen Kay read the book and decided that the case was closed. George Hodel had murdered Elizabeth Short, but the detective in charge of the case at the time, Detective Brian Carr, said that with the evidence being that weak, if he had taken it to a prosecutor, he would have been, quote, laughed out of the office. So, don't be fooled by a quick Google search. Elizabeth Short's murder has not been solved. George Hodel, though a viable and highly likely suspect, has not been confirmed with hard evidence as her killer and likely never will be. It's heartbreaking that her case may never be officially solved, but it's better, in my opinion, than placing the blame on someone who just didn't do it. Hundreds of people have confessed to the Black Dahlia murder, including people who weren't even alive in the 1940s. Get better hobbies, people. Stop confessing to murder and go to therapy like the rest of us. If I confessed to a murder every time I felt self-destructive or bored, I'd have a body count in the thousands. Instead, I dye my hair weird colors and make a true crime podcast. So there's that. And as always, I want to know what you guys think about this case. I know it's popular in the community and everyone has their own spin and facts about the case due to conflicting reports and media sensationalization at the time kind of spreading rumors. I know there's a rumor that Elizabeth Short's sex organs weren't fully developed and that she couldn't have sex, but that was disproven and is just plain rude at this point. But let me know what you think. Hit me up on social media at Cold Case Study or email me at coldcasestudy@gmail.com and let me know. Do you think that the man that allegedly died by suicide killed Elizabeth? Do you think that it was a mob hit ordered by Bugsy Siegel? Did Elizabeth get involved with the wrong crowd trying to climb the ladder to stardom? Do you think George Hodel is guilty of killing not only Elizabeth, but Ruth as well? Do you really think he's a Zodiac killer too? But personally, despite George Hodel being a major skis bag and having definitely killed Ruth, in my opinion, if not other women, possibly patients, I don't think he killed Elizabeth. I don't see Hodel taking the time to taunt police and mail packages with her belongings, let alone taking the time to soak everything in gasoline. It just seems like way too much work for a man that never confessed on his deathbed for fame, who didn't keep a shrine or a journal about the killing to relive the crime, and for someone who burned evidence when his secretary allegedly overdosed. Like, if you burned evidence then, why wouldn't he have burned the evidence of literal murder and like bisecting a woman in half instead of mailing it back to the police so that they could chase him? It's all a little hinky to me. I don't know, maybe he did do it, but one thing's for sure, we will never know, and that sucks. Elizabeth Short, in a dark and ironic way, got what she always wanted: fame. She has been immortalized in books, on the small screen and on the big screen. In 2006, there was a film with Scarlett Johansson that focused on the Black Dahlia case. And if there are any American Horror Story fans out there, you might remember a certain starlet with a white flower in her hair being murdered by a doctor in season 1. That season being Murder House. Well, that was their interpretation of what happened to Elizabeth Short. While not the way she wanted or nor deserved to be remembered, Elizabeth will forever be famous, known to most as the Black Dahlia, a beautiful Hollywood starlet who was taken way before her time. Thank you guys so much for listening to episode 17, Black Dahlia. If you liked it and you like my show, head over to Apple Music and leave me a 5-star review so sleuths like you can find their way to the show. Keep your coffee filled and your sleuth book handy, and I will see you next time. Don't forget to stay safe, sexy, and secure by buying a hologram from youngqueen.shop on Instagram to protect yourself from all the weirdos out there. And don't forget to use my personal discount code, ColdCaseStudy15. Bye, sleuths. Love you. Mwah.